Welcome back to Coach's Exploring the Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. And this week we're on to Chapter 16, The Spiritual Path of Non-Resistance. And this chapter begins, one should view their spiritual work as learning to live life without stress, problems, fear, or melodrama. Stress only happens when you resist life's events.
That's so funny, Greg. That's exactly what I did. I highlighted those two things. Actually, I could have stopped the paragraph at the end of that first sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah. It sums it up.
I love the, this whole chapter, I was imagining what life would be like without stress, problems, fear, melodrama. I mean, certainly my experience the last 2 or 3 years is a steady decline of all those things in my life as I've, been able to work with you guys and learn about the principles and clarity and be in Jamie's community and get a better understanding of how my experience is created and who I really am. Certainly has helped in all those areas for me. I like how he describes it as a process. I'm kind of a process guy, so I like imagining the mechanics of a process. But he says, what an amazing process life is. This flow of atoms through time and space. It's just an eternal sequence of events that take form and then instantly dissolve into the next moment. If you resist this amazing force of life, tension builds within you and gets into your body, mind, and spiritual heart. And, it's funny because the whole notion of the spiritual path of non-resistance, and here he's talking about the flow of atoms through time and space. It's like very sciencey and not spiritual, which I think is a great thing that he's pointing to in terms of, at least I'll speak for myself. I've tended to think of spirituality and science as two separate things. And I love how he brings them together to be, one thing. There is only one thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it speaks very much to me again of about raising consciousness. Because I may be thinking of me now. You were saying about your sort of, movement away from stress and worries and that kind of thing over the last 3 years, Greg. And I'm just thinking, who was I 3 years ago? Let's say 3 or 4, 5 years ago. And I would have found it quite difficult even to get past the first sentence, because I would be automatically creating resistance even to reading that. Like, previous mindset was like, things just aren't possible. You can't, there's none of that. It just doesn't happen. But I'm just noticing how that the whole approach to my even reading a book is completely different. It's like, oh, so what's next then? Okay, well, I've got that part. Now what's going to happen? Now how's it going to be? And how does that feel? So even that, I'm wondering who, why, or for what reason people even choose to pick up a book and read it. A book of this nature, of course. There has to be something that happens beforehand that allows you to do that. And I'm kind of thinking that is part of it. Points to the fact that process of life, the flow of atoms through time and space, points to how it's happening all the time anyway. We just have to get into that flow of time and space. And we do indeed, all of us have moments, seconds even, if that's the best we can do, but it's there all the time, day in, day out.
It's interesting when you said what I don't know, motivates somebody to pick up a book like this. Like since we've started studying this book, and I can't put it down, but I've been telling everyone that will listen to me that I've been reading it.
Yeah.
And many people say, "Oh yeah, I've read that book."
Yeah.
And just the way they say it, I'm like, I'm sure that's true, but I don't think you actually read it very closely because they're not at the same level of enthusiasm as I am about what I'm seeing in this book. And part of that is because of how we're deeply diving into these review sessions, I guess. But yeah, it's interesting how each of us internalizes a book like this differently, depending on where we're at, I guess, on our individual journeys.
I suggested it to a client, and her reaction was, "I've read that book. I hated it." Like, okay, we'll leave that one aside.
It's so interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting.
And that, to me, Vanessa, speaks sort of a little bit to what he says just toward the third paragraph, but if we want to understand this tendency, should that be, the resistance to it, so even the resistance to absorb any information by reading a book and then liking or not liking it. He says, if we want to understand this tendency, we must first examine why we are so resistant to just letting life be. What is it inside of us that even has the ability to resist the reality of life? And I love that. And if you look carefully inside yourself, you'll see it's you. I love that.
He
I'm
keeps
not
reminding us of
reading
that.
that book. I'm not reading that book. I thought it was nonsense, absolute nonsense. And then he goes on to speak about willpower, which also was like an eye-opening moment, as it points to me about the fact I've always considered willpower or will as something, or you've got it or you haven't, or that you need something beyond what you can see right now, or even that you might even have right now. So my usual bottom line is like, well, I don't have the money, so I can't do this. But I think we get caught up in that. But the thing is, it's not about the money, or it's not about anything out there that might seemingly be the source of resistance that will stop you from doing anything. And he basically speaks about will for the most of the rest of the chapter, which I think is just fabulous. And there's so much in here, I think.
Because when you brought that up, this hadn't happened in previously with me reading this and listening to it, but the words from the Lord's Prayer, "Thy will be done," kind of just popped into my head in this context. What you were just saying. That the other thing that popped in my head was the prover proves what the thinker thinks, and that ties into this idea of our will is being done all the time. Like, most of us don't know that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
Including myself.
Yeah.
Because will is a real force that emanates from your being. It is what makes your arms and legs move. And I don't know, he makes me laugh just the way he talks, and the simplicity of his examples of how things work.
Yeah. And he said in the following sentence, they don't just move randomly by themselves. Yeah.
It says, you are not helpless in there. You have the power to affect things. I think that's a very powerful statement. I certainly know, kind of this journey I just described earlier uh, is very related to seeing, like, moving the needle on my level of helplessness, you know. And there's still areas where in my life where I feel helpless, but just like the hopefulness that's in there, are not helpless in there. You have the power to affect things. So
Yeah.
it's a great invitation, I think.
Yeah.
This reference to power and will, and I mean, for me, from this whole chapter, for some reason my mind got very reflective on the notion of will, and it's something I've been reflecting for a while on and off, particularly because even in the world of principles, we talk about the will, and where I landed with this one was, well, I guess it's more of a question of curiosity. It's like Michael refers to it as this force in your being, and refer to it as power of your will, or your free will. We talk to it, and I wondered, and I'm still wondering, is will in its simplest form nothing more than a thought that's about moving in a certain direction or wanting to move in a certain direction? Hopeful versus helpless, wanting to achieve something versus feeling I can't achieve that. Is it all stemming from a particular thought that comes to your mind, and the power of that thought playing out? I mean, we talk about free will as though it's a thing, but I'm curious at a simplest level, is it yet again nothing more than a thought in this particular flavor, particular form? I don't know.
Interesting. And just as you're speaking there, Asanka, I wonder if will is more thought with a capital T rather than a thought. It's the part before. It's, again, maybe to me, I'm seeing it as something that goes back to the source. Goes back to the one universal energy, power of God, the power of divinity, the power of whatever. That's what it sounds like to me. Or the power of nature itself. Nature that has us born in the first place, and then we will walk. We don't just randomly flail our limbs about. That's
Yeah.
what
I mean,
I kind of think.
Yeah, no, it is beautiful. The sense of will has to me, it has a direction and a force and a like you referred to it as a power, and or an intention, like nature, the universe, like it's all moving in a certain direction. And I think with human beings, when we use this thing called will, we are going in a certain direction, or we want to go in a certain direction. And is it, and we have a whole bunch of thoughts during the day where it's not about moving in that direction. Oh, well, I think at the end of the day, all thoughts are moving in the directions, but they just aren't as clear as some of the others. Yeah, this is when I'm just hanging out in the unknown.
It makes sense. And I'm wondering if perhaps that's exactly the distinction that Singer is trying to make. I'm just wondering, just dropped into my head. As again, he compares like will, and he defines it as a real force that emanates from your being. And then he kind of flippantly said it's what makes you your arms and legs move. And indeed, I'm thinking, yeah, we don't actually think about that. But that's what will is. Whereas, wondering if we have an intention that is formulated, it's created in our minds. Like, I've got an intention to go and make some more money today, right? Or I've got an intention to go and do the gardening, or that's already a mental process. And it doesn't actually fit in the realms of will. But indeed, what you said, that's what we do. And we think that, I've got to get the motivation. I've got to have the willpower to go and dig these weeds out because, like, I just don't really feel like it. And I think that's the distinction he's making, because that's not willpower or will. It's a thought. Perhaps.
The intention is a thought too, right?
Say that again, Zanka?
An intention
Mm.
is also a
the consequence of the intention is a thought, but the intention itself could indeed be will, because that's just a flow of atoms. At least in my mind, that's how I see that.
Yeah.
Intention, like the thought comes after the intention, I kind of think.
Okay. I mean, for me at the moment, intention will, I'm cautious not to get too heady about it, because I know that's when I'll lose it. So I'm mindful of that.
For me, it seems like there's this distinction between this version of will versus the willpower to not smoke or to eat the right things or exercise is all related to the will to close or not to close. Like it's and for me, every time I don't know, I can't read the word I or you anymore without asking myself which I and which you am talking about, or am I talking?
Yeah.
So it's like when he says you are not helpless in there, that's the real you. That's the consciousness you. That's not your inner roommate. That's not your ego or your psyche. So it's almost like, that other kind of willpower that most people would be familiar with, like the willpower to not smoke or whatever, or do the right thing. That's the ego or the psyche exercising its willpower, versus the willpower to open or close is the you, which is the consciousness, the soul, the real you.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the way I'm seeing it.
Okay. Yeah.
The way I see it is you're all right, or you're all on, it's all about will. And what jumped out at me is he says the power of self, when it's concentrated and directed, is what we call will. So, in any case, the observer, or the ego, when we concentrate our thoughts or our actions, that's will. Let me think here. If I decide to make a bone broth for whatever reason, I have to concentrate my efforts and get myself organized into action to actually get it done. Or it can just be a thought and it passes by. But the will is that concentration of something, thoughts or actions or whatever it is, to make something happen. That's where you're helpless.
Yeah. It has a real sense of movement, doesn't it?
This may sound completely silly, but I love the fact that you said to make a bone broth, because it itself is like a metaphor for concentrating, like using energy to extract the flavors and the whatever from the, like, I just think, like, of all the random things you could have said, I think it's just amazing.
Nothing like just a cup of tea for Vanessa.
Mm.
I had to laugh because my daughter's came home last night to go visit her roommate. So her roommate at school is going to Wales for the winter semester of school. So she's losing her roommate slash best friend for the next 5 months. So when I read this part, it says, when your best friend moves away, it's understandable that you don't like it. But your inner resistance to that event for years to come does not change the fact that they did indeed move away. It does not do anything to the reality of the situation. And when I was reading and listening to this last night, I hadn't seen my daughter yet. She was at, like, they're back where we live, home from school, so she can say goodbye to her parents and whatever. So I hadn't seen my daughter yet. So I was reading this going, oh, I can't wait till she comes home to find out how did it go, like saying goodbye to her. And is she going to be resistant and sad and bitter and, angry or like, anyway, she's just fine. She's like, they had a nice send off and, yeah. Anyway, it was funny that this example was in the book because it was literally living through it here last night.
Singer talks about preconceptions here, doesn't it? This is the chapter he talks about it. Yeah, because just talking about resistance, I was having a conversation with a client today, and one of the things we landed on was how resistance is some meaning you've made about something, i.e., resistance is nothing more than another thought that's actually we're thinking is real, and we've got to do something about it. And it goes back to something that we were talking about at the very beginning. Life is, what was it? Atoms moving through time and space. And it occurs to me in this full circle that, well, we are atoms moving through time and space, but we just don't see us that way. We see ourselves as, I don't know, these solid things and needing to have things and not have things and needing to protect and not protect. I mean, yes, there's a physical element here, but to the extent that we see ourselves, we don't perceive ourselves as this force moving through, this experience which we call life. It seems to me it's all about a perspective that we actually are in the moment, whether we're in this solidity and in the form, or we're actually in a formless perspective, and where things actually get a lot easier, and what Michael talks about, like letting things go, it becomes so much more easier. I feel like I'm spiraling on a random thought stream here, but yeah, pull me back, guys.
What you're saying. I like how the next part he talks about experience, like, in at least in the clarity world, we talk a lot about how our experience is created. So I love the kind of how this connects to that, and that it points to the fact that our experience has very little to do with the actual event, and it has to do with how we hang on to the experience. The experience of an event does not stop with our sensory observation of it. The event also has to pass through the psyche at an energetic level. The assertion of willpower can stop the energy transfer, and that's what creates tension. And I think it's later on, but I had to laugh again when he's talking about the lines painted on the road. For most people, they just pass through your system with nothing. But if you are a road line painter and you saw that they're not evenly spaced or crooked, it might cause you tons of stress and tension.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so true. Like I worked for many years in the grocery. Like if I go to a store and something's out of stock or out of place, or there's no sign or price on, like I would get so aggravated. Or something doesn't scan right at the front. I don't know.
The whole identity thing for us, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think I've seen this a lot lately. Is that I've got a lot of preconceptions about how the world is supposed to operate, and when things don't line up with it, I get aggravated, less and less so now, but
Yeah.
I just see it and laugh and remind myself I'm just on a speck of dirt spinning around the sun. What's the big deal?
Yeah.
I love this bit. If you assert your will against the energy of the event, and he's talking a past event or future event, it's like trying to stop the ripples when a leaf falls into a still pool. Anything you do causes more disturbance.
Mm.
So if you start to resist something, you're stirring up the pot. Things are going to get crazier. That's what he's saying, and if you want a life without that kind of craziness, just let it pass through you. It's really a choice, the way I see it.
Yeah.
You can choose to resist, or you can choose to just let things go.
Yeah. And that's what struck me at the beginning, Vanessa. The idea that you actually do have a choice, because it seemed to me that this willpower carry on, the will bit was sort of like something that you actually didn't have any choice over. And again, the idea of choice. And the acceptance of our, first of all, how small we are, like Greg was saying, the speck of dirt floating around the universe. But like how the acceptance of our own power, but also the acceptance that we are indeed, for some things, so about will and about anything greater than that, let's say, we are actually powerless. But that's what we need to accept to be able to, I guess, survive in a psychologically healthy sort of way. It's a choice, but there is no choice with it. There's no good or bad with will. It just is.
Yeah.
So we don't actually even have to discuss it. Do you know what I mean? It just is one of those things that just are. And then he talks later about acceptance, and we come on to it anyway. And I think it's directly related. You got to see it how it is, and however it is, we can't do anything about it.
We can't do anything about what actually is.
Yes, exactly. Like we can't stop the ripples when a leaf falls on the pond. And if you do, you're just going to make more ripples if you try to stop it. Because what are you going to do? Try and hook it onto a fishing line? Even when that and the hook falls in the water, it's going to cause more ripples. You're going to get your wellies on and wade in and take it out. What are you going to do?
Well, what occurred to me, Vanessa, listening to your reference was when we resist, I'll speak for myself. Oftentimes when I'm in resistance, I don't see that I'm actually resisting the energy of the event or the feeling of the event or the thought of the event. To me, it looks true that I'm actually resisting the event itself. But when I slow down enough to go, oh, I'm actually resisting the feeling of all the thoughts about the event, that's a bit of a game changer. I'm actually not fighting the world, and plus my experience is not coming from the event. That's helpful. As long as it looks like it's the event that I'm experiencing, oh yeah, then I'll resist it like no tomorrow.
Yeah, but it's your perspective. When you're stuck in that perspective, that's It's so interesting. I agree with
Mm,
you.
mm.
How we can flip in and out of that.
And Elaine, as you were talking about the will, something occurred to me, and this goes back to, put aside your example, about the bone broth, making the bone broth. The image that occurs to me was when you have an idea, when you have a thought that, oh, I want to make that dish, it creates a certain combination of energy in us, like charge in us. It's like, oh, that's what I want to create. And that energy wants to be released or expressed through us. And it just occurs to me, oh, and that energy is like it drives you, or it carries you to that goal or to that end. And I was wondering, wow, that awfully feels like the will that we're talking about in certain way as well. It's like we have an idea, it builds up this energy, and then that energy gets released. Um, which I don't know, which felt kind of cool, like because you know how the idea of effortless creation, where you're actually not forcing, and you're not actually pushing a boulder uphill, like everything just unfolds beautifully, and there is a flow there is a will there, but again, this unfolding of this energy that built up in you or came through you, and there's a real grace to that, versus what, Greg, you are referring to, like that ego condition driven force. Um, as you can see, I'm in the exploration of what will is at the moment. So
The way you described that, that energy, I think is what he talked about a few chapters ago in terms of the Shakti or whatever it was that he called it. Like when you're open, it's not like you're accessing that source of energy through you, that infinite source of energy. So yeah, it's kind of like I don't know, plugging in or switching from ego power center to the infinite universe power center. And that's why it's so effortless. I mean, it's funny. I talk about the first time I lost a lot of weight, it was willpower, sheer willpower, and it was hard as hell. It was like a fight every day. And then this most recent time working with Ollie, I describe it as being like floating down a lazy river, which is basically, you know, experience one was full of resistance and being closed. Experience two was very little or no resistance and being open. One was all my ego or psyche driving the bus. Experience two was my consciousness or my soul or who I really am driving the bus. So
this is like, what occurs to me is like your will versus the divine will. So when we align with the divine will, things flows. But when we're in our own will, that's when it's a lot tougher. Is that?
yeah, I think that's a good way to describe it. I mean, I am reminded every time we're talking about anything, we're all just using metaphors. So
Yeah.
including
Yeah.
Michael Singer
Yeah.
and Sid Banks
Yeah.
and Jamie Smart, because we're trying to describe something that is indescribable.
Yeah. Very cool.
And just before you mentioned the leaf on the pond, Vanessa, the sentence before that is kind of for me important, because okay, so we've got this far. We're talking about will. Somebody's talking about resistance. Somebody else, whether is it universal? Is it ego? Is it you with a capital Y and all the rest of it? And I'm sort of sitting here thinking, well, yeah, and I've said a lot of stuff as well, but like, so what? But then he says, how you deal with your energy flow has a major effect on your life, which I think is kind of relevant. Like, because up to now we're kind of talking about it. Now, now that makes me think, well, I'm interested to know more. Like, what is this major effect on my life? Because I want one of those. I want a life with a major effect, sort of thing. And talking of the metaphors, like he uses a lot of like big adverbs and big adjectives kind of thing, like anything you do, and then this is literally what is happening. Things just get too heavy for you, and it sort of becomes impelling and necessary to take this information on board, because let's say it's pertinent to life itself. So again, I just love the language, the set out, and the way he draws you through parts of life experience, and bringing you to a gentle conclusion that things can change, and things can be so much better.
The sentence that you just read, I have no idea what that is. I'm a bit lost in the book now, but that's okay. The sentence that you just read out there, Elaine, that to me, that brings us right back to choice. He's pointing us right back there. And whilst you were all talking about will versus willpower, for me, listening and reading this chapters of will feels like life force, like that's going on. Whereas the willpower, and your example was so beautiful, Greg, the difference between your weight loss last time and this time, that it feeling like such effort and struggle and resistance and ego psyche. So there's something for me around choice and relying on that life force that brings the ease. That's kind of what I'm taking from this part of the conversation.
Yeah, speaking about the psyche, he says you have to carefully watch the mental voice that tells you to resist something. It literally commands you. I don't like what he said. Fix it. It gives you advice and tells you to confront the world by resisting things. Why do you listen to it? Let your spiritual path become the willingness to let whatever happens make it through you, rather than carrying it into the next moment. You will not be coming from a place of clarity, but from a place of inner resistance and tension. So I love anytime in the word clarity or thought or anything, I clock it. But the idea that, that feeling of clarity is another way to describe the letting it go, of not resisting things. Acceptance means that events can make it through you without resistance. Just deal with them as events that are not taking. Just deal with them as events that are taking place on the planet Earth and are not as personal problems.
It's very impersonal.
I did a post the other day. I had a massage on what day was it? But it doesn't matter. Last week, and it's been very cold here. So anyway, on the roof of the clinic where I was at, they were work people up there clanging away and trying to fix something that I think had frozen or I don't know, whatever. So I'm lying basically above my head, above the ceiling, all this racket, and I'm trying to relax and get this massage. And I kept kind of telling myself this mantra: it's only a problem if you think it's a problem. And I almost tried to listen to the construction noises as if it was like what is the pattern? What is the rhythm? Like almost like trying to turn it into like music. Yeah, I had a lovely massage, and at the end, I said to the massage therapist, says, "Oh my God, that hour went by so fast." And he goes, "Well, I'm glad it did for you because that noise was killing me."
Oh.
So I was letting it go. She was
Yeah.
resisting it. I still had a lovely massage, so it was fine. But it it's a very recent example of it's only a problem if I organize and my experience into making it a problem. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of noises. Like,
Mm. It sounds like, Greg, when you thought that it's not something you thought deliberately, like it sounds like it was an easeful thought, and then you're playing with the sounds was all in play. It wasn't a doing, it is what it sounds like
yeah,
to me.
yeah. Well, yeah, and I think maybe that's the assertion of my will to let it go, to remain open.
Yeah.
And I mean, there was moments of, like there would be kind of a rhythm of the banging or whatever. Then all of a sudden, there was like a grinder, like like I could imagine sparks flying everywhere. But even that,
Yeah.
and I wrote in my post that I also found myself being grateful that there's uh, workers willing to be up on the roof in the middle of winter to fix something, so this clinic can remain open and can serve its customers and its clients and help people be well. So like I also was, I don't know, basking in a feeling of gratitude.
Yeah. I'm curious when you said it was asserting your will, because I find like when I'm asserting my will, we might be talking about the same thing, but just different words and different, directions to the same thing. When I'm asserting my own will, it usually doesn't go very well. It feels like it's uphill. But when I see the moment insightfully, it's effortless. It's kind of like, I sort of collaborate with what's going on. I dance with it. I don't butt head with it.
I like the way you put that. Like to me, it's this, my asserting my will to not listen to my inner roommate, who had all the, you know, this is ridiculous. They should be doing this after hours or before hours, or they should have warned me before. Did I want to reschedule? Like, there was, but I didn't. I just ignored my inner roommate basically. Like I asserted my will to, and again, it's I see I don't know. Lately, I've been seeing this like continuum of psyche, true self, and I'm bouncing back and forth along this continuum. And I find from reading this book and understanding it the way I'm understanding it is as I'm getting drawn more into the psyche end of that continuum, I can kind of catch myself and be like, no, 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 not like just go over there and banter about and play amongst yourself kind of thing. You're not drawing me into the melodrama of the inner roommate.
He speaks perfectly to that, actually, Greg. He says, the way to work with resistance is by relaxing. The act of relaxing through your personal resistance, not only he's talking about the reference to the being afraid of dogs, but then he goes on to say, your soul has now learned how to let disturbing energies pass through you. So that in the circumstances you were in there, so that your massage therapist, bless them, they weren't able to do that. And you can imagine they're in a roommate. Oh, this is going to be disturbing my client. Maybe they won't come back and they shouldn't be here right now. And all these things going on. They hadn't been able to let those disturbing energies pass through them. It's a really good example.
Funny you mentioned the dog story because I loved it and I related to it, substituting the word dog with food. So when I read this, it's like, for example, let's say you're afraid of food. You come to realize that other people aren't afraid and they make it through life. Since you've been afraid your whole life, you've suffered while others didn't. The suffering had no meaning. So you decide to work with fear and relax when you see food. And I was like, oh, I think I can
Oh,
do that. This is the way to
Mm.
work with resistance, by relaxing, which is what you just read. And it says, not only your changes your relationship with food. I'm substituting for dogs with food. It changes your relationship with everything. So it's I love that, you know, you can work on one thing and simultaneously be working on everything.
mm,
This process of relaxing through resistance is beneficial to everything in your life. This is because it directly addresses how to keep your heart open when it is trying to close.
mm.
Sharing the Alan Watts Chinese farmer story with a client last night, where he, his horse runs away, and then the horse comes back with 7 more horses, and then his son breaks his leg, and because his leg's broken, he can't get conscripted into a war, all this kind of stuff. But it was just, you know, I hadn't like just now I'm connecting the two. It's kind of like, the I used to think the moral of the story for in that thing was maybe, like, is it the Chinese farmer's answer to each circumstance was good or bad, and his answer was maybe.
Mm.
But it was like he's not resisting. He's just, life is unfolding in front of him, and he's taking it as it comes.
Yeah.
Um,
Whether the Chinese farmer aware or not, he must have he may be having a very deep understanding of who he truly is, where whatever happens, yeah,
yeah.
maybe whatever, like he knows he's okay at some level.
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm projecting into the idea that, if he was familiar with the untethered soul, he probably would say he was sitting in the seat of consciousness fully.
Mm.
Um, he wasn't caught up in his psyche, in his inner roommate,
Mm.
while the whole village was.
Mm.
Greg, my mind goes back to what you shared about where that choice point where, yep, I'm not going to listen to I think Michael Neal talks about the homeless guy or the radio on that point of choice. Is that still part of your psyche making that decision, or is it something else making that decision? Because most of the time we are identified with the psyche
Yeah.
as who we are. Because not all of the psyche is bad. Like when I say bad, like misunderstood, so to speak, or misled.
Yeah.
Is a more clear thought in the psyche that leads us to make that choice. I mean, I was just curious. So,
Yeah. I'm not sure how to think about that. It's funny you say, because I don't know. I give the inner roommate a really hard time, but I have to remind myself too, earlier in this book where he says, it's not really the inner roommate's fault. We've just given him an impossible job to
Yeah.
control the world.
Yeah.
So we can cut him or her some slack.
Yeah. And if
Yeah,
I'm in
I
a,
suppose to answer your question, or at least it's um, I don't know. I don't know where to me it just feels like that. Like my version of it is that continuum, and it's just that decision is being made closer to the end of the continuum that is my true self.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's not a more a, a distinct part of you where it's just all yeah, I like the reference to continuum. Um, hmm.
Maybe I'll just read the last paragraph here to wrap us up. How's that sound?
Mhm.
It says, you truly can reach a state in which you never have any more stress, tension, or problems for the rest of your life. You just have to realize that life is giving you a gift, and that gift is the flow of events that takes place between your birth and your death. These events are exciting, challenging, and create tremendous growth. To comfortably handle this flow of life, your heart and mind must be open and expansive enough to encompass reality. The only reason they're not is because you resist. Learn to stop resisting reality, and what used to look like stressful problems will begin to look like the stepping stones of your spiritual journey. I love the idea that life is giving you a gift.
Mm.
Like construction noises while I'm trying to get a massage is a gift.
Yeah.
It was an opportunity for you to practice.
That's what I mentioned. I was having all these feelings of gratitude. It's like that's what you're supposed to have when you get a gift.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thanks, guys. This has been a wonderful discussion.
Mm.
I think we're on to chapter 17, contemplating death. Dun dun. I'm sure this one next week will say, despite the
It's
gloomy
the best one.
title, this will be the best one yet.
Yeah.
Let's find out.
See you next time.
See you guys.
Bye.